And welcome back, everybody, to the island of misfit toys, where we don't throw anything away. Nope, we just simply park these old machines in the barn for the next generation to worry about or repair, and that's just what I have here. This was my father's truck. Yeah, that would be my great-grandfather Daniel, whom I never met, but he purchased this vehicle new in early 1918 for our family's fruit business. Prior to this vehicle, it would have been a horse-drawn wagon to make the 5 or 6 mile trip into town to the packing house. So let me give you a little tour here where I am in the restoration process. And again, this is a 1917 International Harvester Model F. So one of the first things we notice on this vehicle is that the radiator for the cooling system is mounted behind the engine, and it's got that nice French Renault style hood on it. Not only for styling, but a couple good reasons. If we have the radiator back here, it's more protected from any damage to the front. I understand back in the day that people didn't really care for some of these noisy gas-powered vehicles, so they might accidentally or maybe even intentionally back their horses into the front and cause a little damage and chaos to these things. So as long as we're over here on the left-hand side, let's take the hood off and see what we have underneath there. All right, so we're over here at the left-hand side of the engine, intake side. And this is a L-head engine, and pistons are captured. There's no split like there would normally be in a flathead engine to take the upper portion off. So those pistons are captured in there. They have to come up through the bottom. And the only access to the valves really directly is through these top caps. Carburetor on this one is a Stromberg. It's what I had on it when I got it out of the barn, but it's I don't believe it's factory original. Should have a Holley carburetor on it. I put the Heisman magneto on it just because that's what I had. I had a nice rebuilt Heisman on the shelf ready to go. When I got this out of the barn, it had the American Bosch mag, but it's not in the best of shape. The only downside of this particular Heisman is there's no adjustment on the timing. The timing is fixed. This would be more of a tractor mag like on your Caterpillar 60 or something like that. So without any timing adjustment on the fly, normally be up there at the steering wheel. You have to really be careful kind of how the timing is set. So I've got it set up with this coupling here, determines my timing, a couple 3 degrees after top center. One thing I do like about this one is it has an impulse coupling on it, so it makes it start quite easily. So up at the front of the engine, the accessory drive, we've got the magneto shaft, cross shaft also drives the water pump. I had some trouble with this pump. The casting, original casting flange was broken, and there was quite a bit of corrosion on the inside there. So I had to recreate one of these just through making up various portions of it on the lathe and mill and then welding them together. So we got a good functioning water pump once again. The impeller was in good shape. It's bronze. So as far as the cooling system, the water comes in from the bottom, goes into the water pump impeller, gets pumped into the water jacket out the top, and back into the radiator. And again, over on the exhaust side, we've got access to our valve lash adjustments. I'll take this cover off, and we can get in there and see the valves. All right, so with the cover off the valves now, you can kind of see what's going on in here. Got the camshaft that runs along just inside the block, of course. Each lobe will push up on one of these solid tappets, and that in turn will push up on the valve, opens the valve. Now, most engines, or many engines, you can adjust this just with a feeler gauge to a particular clearance. On this engine, the book recommends, and yes, I have the book, there's reprints out there. The book would rather you time it via the pointer on the subframe versus marks on the flywheel. There's marks on the flywheel for each valve, intake and exhaust. And you'll rotate the flywheel around until and adjust your clearance so that the flywheel is just in the right spot, just as you start to get drag on these tappets, and this valve would begin to open per the flywheel marks, not the valve clearance. As long as we're over here on the exhaust side, you can sort of see how I routed the ignition wires up through a conduit. It would not have had a copper conduit. It would have had some sort of a non-metallic, non-conductive tube. But this works fine. It's what they used on the Duesenbergs and all those fancy cars back in the past, the Packards and things like that. So far so good, but I'm going to have to be careful on making sure these don't short at some time. But these were the original clamps that I found on this engine for the conduit routing. Access to the valves down here. I did have to make this tool to get in here, and it's been working fine for me. These were pretty tough to get out initially. But now everything's free, and I chased all the threads, so we've got good access to the valves now. I take this one out and kind of see what's in there. There's probably not a lot to see, just the top of a valve, maybe the exhaust valve in this case. So that's what we have. Kind of messy in there, but that's what's going on, just the top of a... So that's how you take the valve out, and also grind the seats and do a valve job on these things. Back over on the intake side of the engine, there's no provision for a oil level dipstick. So what they've given you is this a float and a wire system. So there's a cork float inside the oil pan, and that's connected to the wire that bobs up into the range there. That's your high, and if the wire is down at the bottom there, that's your low level. And to correct that, of course, you come up here to the front, accessory drive, open this, put your engine oil in there whilst checking the level here back on your wire gauge. The cooling system, the fan is a sort of a flat belt affair. It runs off the back of the camshaft and then up to the fan hub itself. It was missing 2 blades when I got it, so I did fabricate 2 additional blades, and it's balanced out nicely now. It moves air forward, so it'll suck air through these little eyelets here on the outside, and also probably mainly through the back here. There's about a 1-inch gap here between the firewall and the radiator, so air is drawn in through the back, is blown forward, and then down and out through the bottom of the vehicle. Suspension, nothing super magical on the front here. The front hangers are really part of the frame. Rear hangers are just conventional, riveted to the frame. We've got a solid axle front end with normal tie rods. Pretty conventional stuff. Back of the vehicle is a little bit different. You've got the hangers on the frame, that's pretty normal. Then we come back to the rear here, and there's no hanger. Well, we've got one in the center there, and off of that center, it's got a third semi-elliptical spring that supports the back of these side springs, supports the axle, And the weight is a 1-ton truck or 1-ton payload. So there's no electrical system on this vehicle other than the magneto and ignition leads. So the only lighting you have available to you are these kerosene lamps. So I've got one in the back here. This is the original to the vehicle. Got one in the back and 2 up front. Some of these trucks were equipped with acetylene lamps. You would have had a Prestolite bottle mounted below the frame here. There are mounting holes here, but you know, I've had this truck completely apart, every nut and bolt, and sandblasted, and there was no witness marks that there was ever a Prestolite bottle installed here. And also on the front, you've got a bolt pattern here for the light bracket. It goes in three holes, and when I got the vehicle, somebody had these homemade sort of light brackets, so it never had any acetylene lamps from the factory, but at some point in its life, it must have had something mounted up here. But that's all gone now, and I took these brackets off. I'm not going to put those back on. So the cowl lamps up front, you had one on each side. I'm still trying to find this bracket here for the right-hand side. It might be out in the barn. Maybe I just haven't searched far enough. I was really surprised actually when I found these originals, the lamps. So I do have all 3 lamps, and I'm just missing today anyway. I'm missing this one bracket here. Might have to look a little deeper. So I'm looking forward to getting some wheels on this thing. They're at the wheelwright's shop right now. And we do have some nice modern Timken roller bearings on the front of this thing. Henry Timken, you know, he invented this system, tapered roller bearings, back 1898, something like that was the patent. So this is just 10 years later, and I feel blessed to have these nice modern tapered rollers on the front here. The back's a little bit different. We've got Hyatt bearings on the back to support the load. Again, it's a 1-ton payload. So we've got a system of just 2 Hyatt bearings, and there's a series of spacers and thrust washers to support this whole system here. So once it's all installed, this system will stack up. And unlike the tapered rollers where you get that nut just right so everything's free, this one you just crank down, torque it down, pin it, and the side lash is really adjusted by these thrust washers. So these are sort of exotic Hyatt bearings, and thankfully they're all in really good shape. So very pleased that I've got a good set of bearings for the back of the vehicle. As far as the cab and superstructure on this truck, it's unknown what it really had originally from the factory. The truck was built in Akron, Ohio, and typically they'd ship these out to the West Coast. It's my understanding that they would crate the vehicle bare frame. Most likely no top, no bed. This is all wood structure that I put on here. But typically they'd be shipped to the West Coast, just bare frame, and then either the dealer or the farmer would put on whatever suitable bed that they'd be using for their application. But looking back in the manuals and all the photos online of the East Coast trucks, typically they had a grain bed, as what this is installed on the vehicle. So I had to fabricate all of this, all the cross members, all the bed irons, and the woodwork itself. So that's been kind of a joy, and I think it came out okay. Had to box in the fuel tank. All this stuff was missing. We don't know that it ever had a canopy on it. Probably no, because all these brackets and things were just completely missing off the vehicle. Had to fabricate all of these. On this bracket, there was some witness marks on this gun stock area that made me think it did have this bracket on it at some point in its life. I don't know that it ever had the full canopy. It's really hard to say, but there were some witness marks in the metal there. When you rebuild these things, all I really have to go by is photographs and things on the online, and talking with folks that do have these vehicles still. There's Mike in Colorado, and Carrie in Pennsylvania. Thank you very much, and John in Wisconsin. And John had a new casting for this ignition housing I was able to put on. So thank you to John. Also missing from the vehicle was this fuel quantity. So the tank resides under the seat, and got just a gravity system. There's no fuel pump, and so you do have a fuel quantity gauge, which is just the glass sight tube here. But all this was missing, and I've fabricated this and recreated it just from photos online. This applique or decal on the side of the frame was quite a challenge. There was a little bit left of the original. I was able to do some tracings and detailed drawings, and then one of my Boy Scouts from the troop, well, he's grown up now, he's become quite an entrepreneur, so he was able to recreate this for me and get some printed out. So thank you very much to Ryan. He did a beautiful job on this frame decal. So we can get up in the operator's position. I'm looking forward to taking this thing for a drive. I'm going to need some wheels first. It's a little bit tight to get in here. Very conventional controls. We got for your feet, you got the accelerator, brake, clutch, very conventional. Transmission is a normal 3-speed arrangement, first, second, and direct or third, and then get over into reverse via this, you lift this little gate up and go into reverse. Nothing magical there. Handbrake or emergency brake just is right there. And it's all freed up. All this stuff was just absolutely stuck when I first got the vehicle. Did have a new data plate made for it, thanks to Mike in Colorado. Still had he had one made up, and got me in touch with the vendor. So got a nice new data plate. I still need to put the registration number on the vehicle. This was licensed in California, and the only numbers, or what they used at the time for a vehicle number, was the engine number. In this case, it's a 7651 is the registration number. Normally there'd be maybe something on the frame here, or maybe on the inside, or maybe underneath. You know, I've had every nut and bolt on this vehicle apart and looked at everything, and there's no frame number on this vehicle. So California went with the engine number. It does have sort of numbers stamped all over it, but nothing that indicates a frame number. There's one on the front axle. There's a number on the subframe. Yeah, the subframe runs inside here, but that wasn't used for registration purposes. Another thing I'd like to do is get this muffler maybe repaired or repacked. This was the muffler that was on it in the barn out there. It's been cut away, and it's in pretty bad shape, but I think a guy could probably repair that. So what I did was I went online and I just ordered this is a muffler of the same dimension as the pipe here. And I think this is for like a Ford 8N tractor or something, but it sure does quiet it down. So that's what I'm using right now, is just an old tractor muffler. So we may get that repaired and replaced. So there's quite a bit more work to do Up here, especially on the seat, I do need to fabricate a couple of brackets here to support this front corner, and also the brackets for the operators and passengers seat backs. There should be 1, 2, 3, 4 brackets plus the seat back boards. There's 2 of them, and then the seat cushion itself. So that's kind of where the progress is now, the seat and the canopy top. But you know, they say the last 10% is 90% of the work, right? But we're closing in on it. Wheels ought to be here shortly. I'll give you an update when those do arrive. Really looking forward to driving this thing. I think it'll be a kick. You know, it's been in the barn for 70 plus years. It was parked, 10 years before I was even born. So here we are. I could probably go on for another 30 minutes or so talking about some of the details on this thing, some of the problems I had to endure, but I'll cut it short right there. And I just want to let you know, appreciate everybody watching this thing. Just trying to document history and honor those that have come before and keep these vehicles alive. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Appreciate you.